Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. I know that we'll still have some people rolling in, but thanks to all of you who joined us. We appreciate you being here. We have a great discussion lined up today. I think as a lot of my SOTA colleagues know, we've been working with Cantata, our friends at Cantata, on an agency leadership series. We did 4 sessions last year, and we've 3 sessions this year. This is the 3rd of 3. And today we're going to be talking about selling creativity, and is the way that agencies kind of think about pricing and selling creativity. Is the model broken? And for the discussion today, we've got some great speakers. Blair Enns, who many of you know, is the founding partner of Win Without Pitching, and also author of at least 2 books that I know of, Pricing Creativity and the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And many of you will also know him from his Two Bobs podcast with David Baker. So thrilled to welcome Blair today. Tim Williams, who this is my first time meeting him, and it's such a pleasure. I know he's made a big impact on the industry. So Tim is a founding partner of Ignition Consulting Group, and also the author of at least 2 books that I know, Positioning for Professional Services and Take a Stand for Your Brand. He also writes on the Propulsion blog for Ignition Consulting Group. So we're thrilled to welcome Tim today. And Brent Trimble is the managing director at Cantata for the marketing services and agency vertical. And prior to being at Cantata, Brent has spent a lot of years in the agency business and knows it inside and out. And we're thrilled to have Brent here today, and thrilled to partner with Cantata on these sessions. So before we jump in, just a few logistics. We've got a full conversation plan today, but we will try to take audience questions if you've got them. Also, feel free to share comments or links within the chat. I always find those actually really helpful when we output the final recording of these sessions, to just go through comments, suggestions, recommendations that those of you on the call have. So feel free to actively use the chat window or the Q&A pod, and if there are questions, we'll try to get to some of them in the course of the conversation. So thanks again for being here, and without further ado, we'll jump in. And I'm gonna start, I suppose, at the deep end and deal with the title of the session today, which is the agency approach to pricing creativity broken? And is it broken? Is it broken in places? What are your perspectives on that? So Blair, why don't we start with you on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Really happy to be here. I want to say it's an honor for me to do this with Tim. As a matter of policy, I don't do panels, but when I was invited to do this with Tim, I jumped at it. I've made like 2 or 3 exceptions. Anybody who's read my book, who's read my book, Pricing Creativity, knows I opened the book with the story of the first time I ever saw a 1-page, 3-option proposal. I said to my client, like, where did you learn to do this? And they said, Tim Williams. So I've been stealing Tim's work for years, sometimes with attribution. It's just great to have this conversation. We don't talk enough. He's going to be on my other podcast soon, called 20%, the Marketing Procurement Podcast. So we're going to do that interview soon as well.
You're way too kind, Brent, and I return all those compliments.
Thank you.
I meant Blair. I'm sorry. Wrong
Brent's
B.
kind too.
Wrong B.
Is the agency pricing model broken? Is that the question, Tom? Yeah. You know, and I think we'll talk more about models.
Selling time for money is kind of like the underlying principle of really what what this business is built on. And I know that that's a complicated question, so we're gonna unpack this further. But I thought to get it started with just some broad perspective from each of our speakers on kind of this big topic, and then we'll drill in from there.
Yeah. So there's the question of selling time for money. That's the default. Like that's the default business model. And how there's history on how we got here. And is that wrong for it to be the default? yes. But I think as the discussion proceeds, we'll see that, you know, the agency model, the idea that there is a model anymore is something I think we need to let go of. And I've only come to that realization recently. It depends on who I'm talking to in the industry. I realize everybody's got a different view on what the model is. It's like you meet a new friend and they say, hey, do you like fishing? And you say, yeah, I like fishing. Let's go fishing. Well, turns out their idea of fishing isn't your idea of fishing. Agency, there's so many different models. There's no longer one model, and it has to do with all the fragmentation and the specialization, the recombination of all these like core different disciplines. The idea that we would be locked into one model now is absurd. I think we and advisors to this space really have to let go of our ideas of what the model is. But fundamentally, time for money as the default model, yeah, it's broken. We should have addressed this. Some of us have been trying to address it for years, but we should have made more progress than we've made so far.
Yeah, awesome. Tim, how about you? Where do you land on this question?
Yeah, well, thanks again, Tom, for inviting me. And I do appreciate a chance to work with Soda finally. I echo everything Blair said. I usually don't do panels like this, but I thought, you know, and I've known Brent for some time, so I figured this would be good, lively discussion, and I would learn a thing or two from it. I think the model is certainly broken. I think broken's maybe the wrong word. It's at least suboptimal. I mean, it can work. I get asked all the time, well, you know, you've got multinational agencies who've been doing this for a long time, so clearly it works. Yes, but let's look at the trajectory of agency profit margins over the last 30 or 40 years, you know, the work of Michael Farmer, and it's pretty clear to see that we're headed in the wrong direction. I'll go a step further and say, I actually believe that the central issue facing our industry right now is that we actually don't have a revenue model. We're missing a revenue model. We have a cost structure which masquerades as a revenue model, but simply adding up all your hourly rates and sending the client an invoice is not the same kind of innovation and creativity that our client organizations apply to pricing. And so to me, what we're trying to do is just bring the agency industry in line with the rest of the business world. It's not really value pricing. It's nothing special. It's nothing magical. It's modern pricing. It's pricing done the way the rest of the business world prices. We're one of the very few industries stuck in the industrial age model of selling our costs instead of our value.
Awesome. And we'll come back to that. I'm really interested in digging into this topic a little bit of, you know, we lack a proper revenue model. So we'll come back to that, and we'll come back to that in the conversation. Brent, you know, you work across probably more agencies than anybody, and you've come from this world. But where's your perspective on kind of the selling time for money as the underlying principle of kind of the agency business? And you know, broken, yeah, probably that may be too strong of a word, but set some context for us before we start to dive in.
No, it's great. And first of all, this is a fantastic panel, and I encourage everybody to buy the books of our esteemed panelists. I still buy in hardcover. So while I've cut my teeth in the digital age, I'm still very much an analog guy. You know, Blair noted the fragmentation, and the model of agencies has really shifted. When we think about the model, we still gravitate toward that large branding comms shop doing great big culture moving TVCs that can still elicit a smile. You know, you look at the cultural movements spawned by even you know, Super Bowl ads and therefore, and you look at the creative folks, many of whom I've been able to and honored really to work with over the years. You look at that, you look at the time, the effort that goes into that creativity, strategy, and resulting with an execution. You say, gosh, you know, this seems nearly priceless, right? But with fragmentation, with all the different models and the gravitation toward paying maybe for output and execution, I think what's really happened is agencies have lost that strategic high ground, because ultimately clients aren't after pure tonnage of output. They're after expertise to pair messaging, strategy, product with a market and with an increasingly complex ecosystem to reach them with tons of modalities and executions and so forth. So when I look at both my experience in leading shops, and then conversely now on the technology side, it's really broken. Yeah, I would say at the macro, it certainly is, for a variety of reasons. The good news is, I think, in the work we've been doing the past few years, and to your point, I have the opportunity to speak with potential partners, existing customers, folks who are sort of in a different stages of maturity and looking at the business strategy for their agency. There's a lot of focus here. There's a lot of creativity. I do often send folks back. I say, really, you need to read, Tim and Blair's kind of notions on these topics. It's a really good grounding principle. But in the short, I think there's a fundamental disconnect between the commensurate level of talent, the outputs that just really still to this day, even with media fragmentation, even with just the plethora of ways to reach consumers and so forth, there seems to be an undervalue of what that takes, and then the talent that it requires.
Yeah. So there's a common theme amongst you three, which is, at a minimum, there's potentially some disconnect between value of thinking about the value of what we can deliver as a business, but being too tied to thinking about our cost structure. So spending lots of time thinking about and optimizing our cost structure, and probably less in defining and understanding the real value of what we deliver. And so we'll come back to you first on this, Tim, and maybe you can extend a little more on this thought of agencies lacking a revenue model. I think that's an interesting principle, and we'll use that to dig in. And I also want to address a little bit of what we feel like the real value creation is in this industry. I mean, again, beyond the obvious things, things that we know.
Yeah. Well, I'll take it a step further and say that a revenue model is an important component of our overall business model. I think to take it to a deeper level, we have an unscalable business model. I mean, that's in the end, the thing that's going to kill us is our self-imposed profit ceiling. If you think about the billable model, you take the number of people, the number of FTEs in your organization, the number of billable hours, you do the math, and there you've just got a figure that represents your total maximum revenue for the year. You can't make any more than that. That's it. And therefore your maximum profit. So what other business would put a cap on their profit, on their annual profit? So to me, we need, and this takes us into slightly different territory, but certainly all interrelated. We need to inject some scalability into our business model, because right now the labor-based model is not scalable at all. The only way we can make more money is to hire more people, and by definition, that's not scaling. So I want to touch on at some point, if we can during our conversation, the important trend toward productization. And I think AI and machine learning come into that. How are you going to bill? How are we going to bill for that? The labor-based model makes no sense in that context. So I think it's an important turning point in our business. It's not just, can you make money billing by the hour? Sure. But if you look at the revenue per employee, which is one of my favorite metrics, of the average advertising agency, and this varies by discipline. Digital agencies would be different from media, but on average, WPP, for example, revenue per employee, 151,000.
Mhm.
You know what it is at Google? It's at 1.3 million.
Right.
At Apple, it's over 2 million. At Craigslist, it's over 3 million, right? So that's a scalable business, but for us, we have to keep adding people to be able to add more revenue. And so therefore, the question of, and Brent touched on this a little bit, we don't sell activities and efforts and inputs. We sell at the very least outputs, and eventually, and you know, ultimately we sell solutions to business problems. We should be pricing that, not the effort that goes into it.
Right. So I mean, that's an important point, and we definitely will come back to productization and different models that are starting to play into kind of professional services. But I want to switch over to Blair for a second on the value equation. Where are agencies getting it so wrong in kind of their ability to think about and adequately price from a value perspective? You know, I mean, because I think one of the challenges, for even just from a pure analogy perspective, is, you know, Apple does sell products that are repeatable in terms of, you know, they don't make a different iPhone each time you buy an iPhone. So there is some supposedly, you know, efficiency or economy in that. In professional services, again, we'll get into the productization side of that, but there is at least some more variability in the output that we produce. So even if it's an ad, that's a discrete output, but different each time that we produce it. But Blair, maybe talk a little bit just about the kind of the underpinnings of value and where, you know, where most agencies kind of get that wrong when they think about it, or maybe like what's the block for them to really kind of think about and define and understand what value is.
Yeah, I'm going to bring it back to business models and even Tim's note about productization, because, you know, my comment off the top about we're thinking that there's this one business model.
Right.
It's just so not true right now. Like if you take, so you take soda firms, you might have firms that do mostly digital campaigns, and then you have digital product firms, right? And if you're building a product, your opportunity for value creation is just massive, and for value capture is massive. I remember years ago, I was doing a seminar, a business development seminar in Chicago, and there was a guy, a biz dev guy for a firm I'd never heard of, who kept like kind of showing off and like he was trying to impress on everybody else in the room how successful the firm was that he worked for. And I got a little short and dismissive with him. And then at the break, he came up to me and he said, "No, you don't understand. The owners of this firm, they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars." And my first reaction, I said out loud, "Product design, right?" And he said, "Yes." So this is the pre-digital era where we had very few digital agencies. This is a product design firm, industrial design firm. And I said, you get a licensing fee on the products you create? He said, "Sometimes." And the firm is called Nottingham Spurk, and you can look them up. And the owners of the business, the founders, are still active in the business, but their sons are now running it. He said, sometimes we do design for cash, and that's always one option. And when we do, it's a lot of cash. But other times we retain the IP and license it to them. Sometimes we get a percentage of sales. Sometimes he said, we've made tens of millions of dollars based on the product that we designed getting sold to somebody else, or the company getting sold. And he said, sometimes when we get an idea, we don't even wait for a client. We patent it, we prototype it, then we sell it to the client. Now, just think of, and I had worked with a couple dozen industrial design firms by then. Not one of them had ever done this. And I would always bring it up because as an outsider to that space, I didn't really know it well. I thought, wow, you're creating all this value. Why are you charging by the hour? And they would say, "Oh no, our clients won't. And then along comes this one firm. It's like, no, this is the way we do it. So what they're able to earn is just multiples, orders of magnitude greater than what their competitors earn, because they're just thinking about it differently. And so that's one, I won't ramble too much longer, but That's just one way about thinking about it differently. Another way, firms are so specialized now. And if you are vertically specialized and you're solving an expensive problem, and you've figured, like if you're an SEO, PPC, if you can drive traffic to a business in a vertical and you know how to do it so well that you can kind of make predictions, you can quantify it, and you can cookie cutter paste that business to others in the vertical, the idea that you would be selling time is criminal. Like if you read Alex Hormozy's book, $100 million Offers, the thinking in that book doesn't apply to what we would consider the usual agency model. But if you're vertically specialized and you can generate leads, and then you can even work to translate leads directly into revenue, your opportunity to make money is through the roof. And you're cramming a really valuable business into this little business model that's the agency time for money model.
Yeah. And I'm glad you raised that, because I think that we often simplify, like we do with too many topics, we simplify it and pretend that the pricing approach for all agencies is the same, and the reality is it's not. And I think as we traded some notes on this earlier, I think there's a spectrum of agencies that have more ability or less ability to price from a position of value. And so, for instance, I think that agencies who are doing straight marketing operations, we're resizing assets, we're making an ad into 4 different languages, we're running an email campaign, etc. There's could be a performance component to that, but a lot of the labor that's going into it is fairly mechanical. On the other end of the spectrum, I think that the connection to, say, digital products seems very clear in terms of leverage to price from a different perspective, or as a performance marketing, agency. I'm going to jump to Brent, and I'll throw this at you and see if you have any thoughts on this, and we can kind of come back to Tim. But just as you were sort of looking at the agency universe, where are you seeing pockets, where, pricing from more of a value perspective feels more feasible, and again, it could be applied, I think, to any one of these, any one of these agency types, but there certainly feels like ones that are more feasible versus ones that are less feasible. Do you have any thoughts or perspective, on that?
No, absolutely. So what we're seeing, and we deal with a wide array of agency types, as you noted, the whole spectrum, whether it's biddable media, public relations, all the way to your large comms shops, and certainly some holding codes. So I certainly won't name anybody, but I think where a lot of agencies are starting is recognizing the challenge and becoming a bit more disciplined. And sometimes the evolution of a pricing to value strategies just starts with holding the line, having confidence and conviction that their product is worth a premium. And whether that's grinding it out with procurement, who, we could probably spend a whole topic discussing that and how they sort of dissect hourly rates into to Tim's notion, that just is a race to the bottom, right? I mean, ultimately, and they say they sort of start there, and they say, then there's another realization that not all revenue is created equal, and there's really bad revenue. But in the middle of kind of the space, I'd say firms that are doing complex, diverse work where there is some activation, there is some kind of the machinations of acquisition marketing, all the way up to more of the large branding pieces. They're going back in time and they're looking with data at campaign elements, strategy, branding that resulted in tremendous shareholder value for their clients. They're with a little bit of business acumen, they're going back and looking at quarterlies and, gosh, we launched XYZ product and look what it did, look what it took off. Then they're computing their effort, what their total remit was, indexing that to some value. And now what they're doing is packaging these launches or components or executions and saying, we're putting a stake in the ground, and we're not getting into the rate card discussion with you and procurement. And if that's where this relationship is going, we're probably not the right fit. They're having that conviction. And they're melding a bit of course, costs. We've got to pay our people and load and all that kind of stuff. A really compelling margin, but then a ladder of value on top of that, and packaging these components as large priced objects. I wouldn't say, in this we're seeing, I'm thinking in the past 36 months, talking to hundreds of shops. This is a prevailing notion we're starting to see, but they have to start with some data. And they have a corpus of history that they can go back to, but then indexing that against how did this do for our client? And of course, you immediately go to biddable media, or we're running AdWords campaigns, or we have an Amazon practice, and whatever the case may be. That's the easy stuff, but it's more around market share, sentiment, trajectory, attach rates. What did this really do? Was this product launch mentioned in our clients' quarterlies? And then they're putting a premium on that and wrapping that in a packageable, kind of productized, without it being, of course, something like software or widget. So we are seeing that. We're definitely seeing that.
Yeah. Tim, I'm curious, and this will be for Blair too, but just some practical considerations like this. So, how does an agency start to think about value and price it to some extent? That's sort of one facet of the question. And I suppose the other one is, as you get out in the market and sell it, not all of, but most of the buyers are buying when they look at the landscape and the competitive landscape, and they're looking at alternatives for getting particular work done. They're looking at pricing that's largely based on hourly rates. So so there's the component of how do you start to practically kind of like think about value and define it, and then how do you take steps to kind of compete effectively in a market where a lot of the buyers are rate driven?
Yeah. Wow, there are a lot of topics packed into that question. Let me maybe start just by reminding us all that this is our pricing system. This is not the clients. They didn't invent it and say, hey, you have to work this way with us. We developed this in the early 1980s. I mean, prior to that, nobody in the business did a timesheet. I mean, Don Draper didn't do a timesheet, not just because he's a creative director, but because agencies in the 1960s, 1970s, up into the early 1980s, there was no such thing as time tracking. We had a completely different revenue model. We actually did have a revenue model back then. It was David Ogilvy, and I spent my formative years there, who takes credit for being the father of the fee system. When we unbundled our business and when we balkanized the agency business model, we had to look for other ways of making revenue. So David Ogilvy decided that we should copy what lawyers do. I mean, we decided that we're going to change the way we get paid. So if you worked at an agency at that period of time, you would have gone and met with your clients and said, hey, you know how you used to pay us commissions and markup and all of that? Well, now we'd like you to pay us by the hour. We're going to keep track and detailed hour. So we taught them the hourly rate system. Let's keep that in mind. They didn't impose it on us, because I think that's important. So because the reason they're playing back rates to us and we have all these obnoxious conversations is because we've trained them so well. They've developed all of their systems and all their structures and their procurement systems all around hourly rates, because that's how they think we want to be paid. So we have the opportunity and the responsibility to now say, hey, there are yet other ways that we would like to work with you in terms of compensation. So in terms of and Blair will have some great thoughts about this too. And by the way, if you want a place to start on this and you haven't really been exposed to it, you should buy and read Pricing Creativity, Blair's book, and it's it's the best place to start for sure for people who haven't been exposed. But I simply say, look, if you're looking for a place to start, just reimagine what you do as at least as outputs. Get out of the notion that you're selling activities and efforts. It's not what clients really buy. Everything you do can be reimagined as an output. So it can be framed and described as a deliverable, and attach your price to the output, not the input, to the deliverable, not the person, the program or the product, not the FTE staffing plan. That's the first basic change. And then the question is, well, how do we know that? Well, you know, how long, if you've been in business more than a few years, you've got the history. I mean, Brent was talking about this. You've got a historical database that tells you basically what you need to make on an average output, small, medium, large, extra large, right? There are different versions of it. That's the first basic place to start. And by doing that, you just made an important change. You've moved your organization away from this notion that we sell efforts and activities to, no, we sell deliverables at the very least, and lots of variations beyond that. And let me just say one more thing. There is, from what I see over the past few years, a strong global movement client side toward deliverable-based pricing. I meet with many agencies who tell me their large, you know, Unilever, P&G, Nestle type size clients are actually insisting on it. They don't like the hourly rate system for a whole lot of reasons, and they at least want to move to deliverable output instead of input. So as a place to start, that's my advice.
Hey, can I interject and ask Tim a question?
Yeah, please.
Tim, as you're talking, it's just you and I grew up in the 15% commission days, and you know, there's some. I never thought I'd say this, but there's some great things about that model, and I wonder if there isn't room in the market for an agency to say, okay, we're going back to straight commission at 15%. It's basically full service, and then you could scale it down from there and negotiate. But the airline business, the prices used to be regulated. So the way airlines would compete with each other is they would take the margin that was built into the price and they would spend it. They would reinvest it in quality of service. So, you know, these scenes of like in the Pan Am flights where everybody's smoking and and the chairs all swivel and there's a table in the middle. Now 4 people are having dinner. That was driven by the fact that the price was set. And then everybody was competing on quality, and the 15% commission, like all of the recent, there weren't these line items that were delivered to the client. It was the client was like, no, you take that 15% and you spend it however you think is best for our business. I never thought I'd be nostalgic for that model, but here I am.
Well, let me give you a quick reaction since you brought it up. I mean, like you, I was raised on the idea that the commission system is evil. And I was trained, but I didn't do a timesheet. When my first job in New York, we didn't have timesheets. There was no time tracking. We made our money on commissions, markups. And then I was taught when I moved to Ogilvy, by Ogilvy, that's evil. Everything's net. We're going to, you know, what you get, exactly what you pay for, no more, no less. I knew that whole drill, but I have gone back to the idea that actually commission system was better, more progressive, better alignment of economic incentives than the hourly rate system by far, for the reasons you've just described, Blair.
In a stroke, it eliminates the marketing procurement department.
It does. And I mean, just quickly think about, you know, you've all watched Mad Men. They sit around thinking about, they've got a department store client and they're thinking about, should we move the men's department to the 3rd floor? And should, you know, what signs should greet people when they walk through the door? And they have product development ideas that agencies today don't do because there's no job number. You know, they can't bill it anywhere. But back then they had every incentive to want to make the brand successful, because the brand, the more successful the brand, the more they're going to spend, the more they're going to invest in media, the more the agency makes. It's a virtuous cycle that is non-existent in the realm of the hourly rate. Sorry, Blair.
No, not at all. So a couple things to pick up on that. that the commission scenario works well with media spend,
Yeah.
lots of agencies aren't dealing with media spend in
Yeah.
any meaningful way. So that definitely presents a challenge, a challenge there. But I do think, I mean, there's a simplicity to that model that's beautiful, really. But I want to pick up on, I'm going to throw a couple things at you, Blair. So I hope you can multitask, I think. When would you mind mentioning the book you mentioned earlier? I think it was maybe about.
It's $100 million offers by Alex Hormozy.
Okay.
And you'll look at this book and you will think snake oil salesman, you will run the other way. Trust me. And it's really like, if you've got this converged business model where you're vertically focused, et cetera, it's, even if not, there will be some great takeaways in that.
Okay. So then I want to have you pick up on this, just kind of the practical starting points of thinking about and understanding the value of what you deliver versus just the cost that it takes to deliver that.
It's so easy for us to say this, but this is a cultural issue. This is an issue of the culture of the organization. And you can even try to change it from the top. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I took on a large private client, a UX firm, over 100 people, lots of layers, working with the two owners who just really wanted to change the culture of the firm to one that's value-based instead of cost-based. But the systems and the middle management layers absolutely would not allow it. The systems atomize everything into like an effective hourly rate. We need to, and Tim writes about this a lot, we conflate price and cost, right? So we have this hourly rate, we put it out to the client, and to us, it is both the price they pay and it is our cost. And it's not really our cost, it's our cost with an expectation of profit built in at a certain utilization rate. So we don't even make the distinction. Like in a normal business, if you're going to do cost plus, so value-based, you would have a discussion about what are the outcomes that the client wants to achieve. You would talk about, well, what's the economic value of that to be created? And let's say it's 10 million in net new recurring profit. Then you would go back to the team and say, okay, I'm going to price this at 5 million. You wouldn't even say that to your team. You would say to yourself, you would actually have a conversation with a client about, okay, well, what would fair compensation be for us if we could help you create this value? And there's more nuance to it than that. Then let's say you arrive at the number where you think it's half of the first year's profit is fair. And don't read anything, you will, but don't read anything into these numbers. But just let's say you decide you're going to price this at 5 million. You don't go back to your team and say, we have $5 million at cost to come up with a solution. You go back, you take profit off the table. You go back to the team and say, we have $3 million to come up with a solution, or 2 million or 4 million, whatever it is. You take the profit off the table, because in a normal business, profit is basically price less cost, right? Price less profit equals cost. So take your profit off the table. I would say still use your same hourly rate. And see it as cost with an expectation of another form of profit built in. But if there isn't a delta between the price that you're giving to the client and what you see as your costs, then you're fundamentally thinking about the business always from this place of cost-based. You have to start with value. You have to take profit off the table. And it's easy for us to say that. It's the hardest thing to do, to change the culture of an organization, even when the people at the top want to do it. Now, granted, that was a fairly large firm. It's really hard to change. Most of the systems are geared towards cost.
Right. I want to dig into a facet of this, and then we're going to come back to Tim. We'll come back to kind of productization and in that facet. Although, let me ask you this quickly, because someone did throw this question in. Blair, Tim, you could address this. Any thoughts on this? Comes back to, we potentially created the buying behavior in the market, although for most of us, I think on the call, we've inherited the system. We didn't necessarily create it, and the buyers are. buyers in a lot of ways aren't buying value. Like if you look at an RFP or a proposal, they're buying things, even though realistically they want to buy value, but they're going, well, we want a website, we want this campaign, we want this brand strategy.
Can I just speak to that quickly?
Yeah.
Just because you get an RFP from a client saying,
Sure.
This is what we want to buy, this is how we want to buy it. We're so guilty of thinking this is the law. It's like a tablet from Moses. Like these things are crap. These documents that they give us to try to buy. So we need to look at them and go, oh, well, that's a nice attempt. Put it aside.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation. It's just, you're not beholden to that stupid document.
Yeah. So Bill, on this, so the question is, any quick tips or advice on, when the client's coming back to you and going, well, this isn't really how we buy agency services. Other than again, starting to be more discreet in who and how you work. But and I know that's a bigger topic. So maybe just some quick, top of the mind thoughts on addressing that question from clients.
So if you really are creating economic value and you have a way of kind of measuring that, and you have some degree of confidence in predicting your ability to create economic value, that's when it makes sense to be pricing based on value. And then you find yourself having a conversation with a middle manager who's forced to buy a certain way. And that's the fundamental discount. It's one of the disconnect. It's one of the reasons why pricing and selling are inextricably linked. Executives are charged with future value creation. Managers are charged with managing people, projects, and budgets. Right. So you want to have value conversations with an executive, and where possible. And some of the more progressive kind of managers who are moving fast up the hierarchy, they might be interested in the topic of value creation. Are you hearing somebody mowing my lawn?
No.
I think it's lovely that you're in a place warm enough that the lawn is being mowed. So I'm jealous about that.
So I'm distracted. This is really loud. I'll hand this over to Tim to finish whatever my thought was.
Yeah, Tim, any thoughts on just addressing that in kind of the client conversation?
Well, I think nobody's better at this than Blair in his work. I mean, he teaches the art and science of having a backbone. It's the challenger sale. It's the polite, asserting, polite control. It's the yes, no, yes. It's, the agencies, look, the essential problem is that agencies, I stand up in rooms full of CEO, CFO, C-level agency executives, sometimes of very large agencies, and I'll ask, how many here today have ever read a book on pricing? Not a single hand goes up.
Interesting.
How many here have read a book on the art of procurement? Not a hand. No, it's an unfair fight because we complain incessantly about how we're being dragged through the mud by procurement and, these guys are eating our lunch. And well, meanwhile, have you studied it? Have you been to a procurement conference? Have you listened to a procurement podcast? Do you know the art of pricing? Have you read any of Ron Baker's books? Or, it's so I mean, I only have so much patience for the frustration that's being expressed by agency people who've put zero effort into learning, Negotiating with Backbone, Reed Holden, best single book I've ever read on dealing with procurement, because he deconstructs all the games that procurement professionals play and offers really practical advice for pushing back. But how many agency people have read that book?
Right.
Very, very few.
I think I'll add that book pairs nicely with another book he wrote called Pricing with Confidence. So Pricing with Confidence, then Negotiating with Backbone. They're both small, easy to read books.
Yep.
Those are awesome. And I want to, Brent, I'm going to move to another topic, but I want to just emphasize here, because Blair, I've had a chance to work with you enough, and Tim, I'm hearing similar things, is that I think we collectively, we undervalue the extent to which a lot of this is around behavioral change. and mindset change. It's like we're getting mired in the like the intellectual complexity of thinking like, well, how could you possibly do that? Like, how could I change the perspective of the market? Or it's, here's how I think about costs. And sometimes, and I hear people tell me this all the time. It's like, well, I mean, like that sounds nice on paper, but it doesn't work. And, the reality to making it work is in the practice and in the behavior. It's not always in the fact that it's an intellectually complex solution. It's actually in a lot of cases not intellectually complex. So I just want to kind of reflect that back to the audience, because I see that a lot and I hear that resistance a lot, but I do understand that the reality of making this work is largely behavioral. And I think Tim's point is a great one too. It's like, how much have we taken the time to really educate on ourselves on the art of negotiation, on the art of procurement, on the art of pricing? I mean, I'd venture to say that very few of us on this call would say we know a whole lot about those topics. And yet we do complain about it all the time. So I want to move to Brent, and we'll come back to the group, but I'm curious and we didn't put this in the discussion guide, but I think you'll be able to talk about this. But I'm curious to the extent that we, as agencies, do ourselves a disservice by not specializing enough or not understanding our specialization a lot. Or another way of looking at it is, is it harder for us to achieve value from the outputs that we're creating when so many of us as agencies do so many things? And it's kind of like, oh, well, we're this creative agency who does brands, and we do campaigns, and we do this, and we do websites, and there's a pendulum in the industry that moves between more integration, more services, and more specialization, and I get that, in both models work. But I'm just curious from your perspective, what you see. I see most agencies having a hard time really thinking about specialization. And I'm wondering if that is at least a facet that hampers us in our ability to command any kind of premium value for the work that we're doing.
It certainly can be. It's an excellent question, excellent topic. And my observations in the past few years have been more agencies are at least attempting to go into some kind of vertical specificity in industry. So that gives you the opportunity. You can be very horizontal in practice and delivery, but if you're specialized and have valued expertise in key industries, managing directors, head of data science, head of research, who are thought of by clients as peer level or above, and really know, travel and tourism, really know, of course, life science has been doing this for a long time, but have a real commanding height. This is where, and Tim spends a lot of time on this, and I think, I was an early adherent to, take a stand for your brand. In fact, talks a lot about this, but really specializing in industry. You can, of course, specialize in practice. And an example would be, if you're a system integrator of a particular piece of technology or practice, or you're building maybe an Amazon practice, they've experienced, huge growth, and you can really be known for that. What I've noticed over the years is a trend in shops to take a page, I think, out of the management consultancy playbook and really specialize in deep vertical specificity to client business.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you shed specific practice. Maybe it will over time. Maybe they atrophy. You don't really need them, and you don't need to be as horizontal. But that attempt, and we talk to a lot of different shops, and we talk about BI and insights into your business, and how are different facets of your business doing. Where do you place your bets 18, 24, 36 months out? How do you craft and mature a business? And really, it helps refine focus of your new business strategy. It helps refine focus of talent. Where do you invest in cultivating people? But it's red ocean, blue ocean, but I, you know, anecdotally and have seen more of that. And it is something certainly we encourage. And if you look at performance of shops, you know, the you know, good, bad, or indifferent, I mean, the category, you know, broadly marketing services has been pretty resilient, right? We've had some bumps made through the pandemic. Even, you know, this year, some of the holdcos are reporting decent numbers as you know, as bellwethers. But when you look at shops that choose to go very deep in specificity in industry and client category, and really, you know, publish thought leadership that's very highly regarded, deeply researched, commission studies in the market, invest in the talent that's seen to be real specialists, they inevitably do very, very well.
Yeah, Tim, do you just want to weigh in on that a little bit? This notion of, you know, are there too many generalist agencies out there that are kind of hampering themselves in terms of real value creation by their, you know, their generalist approach to creativity, you know?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you said it, Tom. If you want to command a premium price, you know, it helps to be able to deliver premium value. I think that the best way to look at this, that should be clear to anybody, you know, what do clients ultimately buy from us? Obviously, my answer is it's not efforts and activities. What is it? Well, in a word, my favorite answer to that question is expertise. You know, clients buy our many years in the business, our knowledge of the category, the contacts we have, the numerous times we've solved similar client problems. And expertise cannot be packaged up in a unit of time. It's the wrong container. You know, the clock is the wrong measurement device for knowledge work. It has nothing to do with what we do and nothing to do really with expertise. So if you buy the answer that clients ultimately buy our expertise, then you have to come to the realization that you can be expert at something, but you can't be expert at everything.
Yeah.
Right. The generalist so-called full service agency is, you know, is really a frustrating business model. I mean, our mutual friend David Baker writes a lot about this, his books, and he's got a new book out now on expertise. So yeah, long way of saying I agree with that. I think we're all of a similar mind.
If I could just add to that, I think just to everybody who's on this call, you think of how you talk about your business, how you position it to the market, and how you think about it. Are you using language that describes the tools that you use, or are you describing the expensive and urgent problems that you help your clients solve? It's one or the other. And the people who are still like holding on to this generalist, like, you know, Tim's written 2 books on this, and it's I think we've been doing this about the same length of time, over 20 years for me now. And it's like I'm almost like I get frustrated at the topic that there's still people. Like, we'll have a conversation with somebody that's like, yeah, I know we need to specialize, but my partner, the creative director, just resisting. Because you like having no pricing power, because you like, you know, being at the whims of the market. Like when you start to identify with expensive problems that you solve, like everything starts to change from there. You start to let go of your tools. I'm fond of saying that in value-based pricing, one of the interesting things about it is it will stress the boundaries of your business model, because you're talking to the client about the future they want to create and the value that will be created. And then you set a price. Well, if I could help you create this value, would you pay us this much money? I don't know, maybe. Okay, well, that's a lot of money. You go back to your team and you say, you've got $2 million to come up with the most creative idea to deliver the highest degree of certainty that we can help these people create this value. And they look at you and go, well, like, we don't even know how to spend $2 million. And you say, and you've already taken like 2 or 3 off the table for profit. And you say, well, yeah, $2 million, you could buy another business. right? You could say, find a solution, to partner with somebody. Let's think of things we've never done before. What's the highest degree of certainty we can bring to these people to help them create this value? Then you start crafting solutions that are like, well, we've never done this before, but let's put it in front of the client as one of the options. And it might entail hiring a few people. It might entail buying another business. It might entail these other things. So that's how you you start out this kind of narrowly positioned, but you actually start to break those bounds. Doesn't mean that you should change the language that you use to describe your firm necessarily, but it will stress the boundaries of your business model as you find yourself focused on value creation rather than doing design or whatever the thing is that you do, campaigns.
Yeah.
So I want to switch to, would you guys be willing to go an extra 5 minutes?
I can.
I think I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Because I do want to touch on this topic of productization of services, and in particular, I think with what we're starting to see with AI technology, and again, it's still very early days, you know, where are we seeing some opportunities to kind of enhance the professional services model, augment it, turn it on its head a little bit with, you know, even when they actually are services, that they become more product-like in either how they're, you know, how they're delivered or, you know, or run. And Tim, we hit on this earlier, but I'll start with you on that, just from a, you know, a business model perspective, productization in, you know, in new technologies, how you see that playing into it. And, you know, I would say that I don't think agencies are thinking urgently enough about the kind of potential here.
Yeah.
Just as an opening premise, I think that the amount of disruption that can be created is going to be greater than what most are anticipating. But the potential for what they can do to their business is also being underestimated. So I wonder if you want to, and this will be the last topic. We'll spend a few minutes on that. I mean, hear from each of you before we close down.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of the issue here is psychological. I mean, we have an aversion in professional services to the idea of productization, don't we? Because we like to feel like everything we do is unique and custom, and there's nothing that's ever off the shelf. So we have a natural resistance to it. But look at the large consulting businesses, the McKinsey, Bain, Boston consulting businesses, and you'll see that well over half of their revenue is derived from what I would call products or programs, 65% or more. So the gold standard in professional services has found a way to productize their intellectual capital. The idea, and so I think here's a psychological adjustment for us. We're not talking about necessarily money while you sleep standalone products, although it's good to have some of those in your portfolio if you can. At the very least, we need to, and Blair was just talking about this, we need to take that bullet point list of competencies and services that appears on every website, agency website, and reimagine those not as features, but as benefits, and to put them together in constellations of competencies that become a program, at least a named program. Because you can price a program and you get better and better at delivering a program. And, Blair gave many examples of this, and you keep the difference, right? You get better and better. Under the hourly rate system, you give that money back. The better you get, the less you earn, right? The faster you work, the less you earn. That's a pretty dumb business model. So by at least moving toward programs and products, we're able to benefit from our expertise and we're able to scale our businesses. There's a case study in the making right now, the IPG agency Huge, which has and there's a new book being written about this by Michael Farmer, who wrote Madison Avenue Manslaughter, that tracks the process they've gone through to reimagine their business as completely productized. So go look at the Huge website. And you'll see that they have 3 products, and these products are supported by kind of sub products, and they have icons and they're named, and so that they have a roadmap. When they get a new assignment, they put together a roadmap based on these products and programs. That's the future of our business. And it's a big, I believe, and it's a big adjustment psychologically. It doesn't mean that we're going to lose our ability to customize. Of course, there are going to be custom solutions to the business problems. It's just that we've got a framework as a place to start, a roadmap that helps clients buy us, right? So they know how to engage with us.
Yeah. Brent, any thoughts to add on that in terms of what you've been kind of seeing in the market in terms of productizing services? But I mean, another facet of that is bringing more technology into the agency that just helps you scale.
There is, yeah, absolutely. That's part of it. And I think the huge example is great. And I encourage everybody to, as Michael's book comes on the market, and the requisite tours come out, take a look at the website. And we're good friends with Huge, so it's been great to see that transformation. The other flip side of this is building these programs with repeatable processes. So while Bain and McKinsey and BCG do productize these programs, they do manage services, all kinds of delivery packages at global scale. Coming to the solution is something that they productize very, very early in the formative stages for it. So, strategic frameworks, how to create outcomes, and agencies can take a real close look at that and say, how are we, what frameworks and what methodologies do we employ to ultimately build the solution that then we can price the value and not be creating this from scratch each time. Doesn't mean that it discounts creativity. In fact, one of our contentions when we talk to agencies in various stages of maturity and when they're getting serious about their business is good operations and good practices give you more time back for creativity, innovation, exploring where is this shop going to go? What kind of talent and resources and technology are we going to invest in? So those fundamental frameworks, McKinsey has a lot of them, and it's amazing that this is expertise, establishing frameworks for critical thinking to drive client outcomes that agencies can get for free. You can certainly invest in some training, get your people stood up, and how to talk value and outcomes with clients. But those formative stages, we're definitely seeing that for productizing. Certainly, I think looking at that upcoming Huge case study is and how they've been availing it now, and you can see it in real time, is certainly a great model to emulate.
Muted myself, apologies. But Blair, why don't we close with you, and any thoughts on kind of productization and within the service, within the service model, how we might think about that, and do we need to get on that more aggressively as an industry?
So many thoughts. We could do a whole podcast on this, probably a series. Yeah. I've written and spoken on the subject of productizing your services a lot, and I've got a lot wrong, and I still haven't put the record straight on this. It's a more nuanced topic than I appreciated. And when I was referenced earlier about this idea of like even advisors getting locked into business models, I think if you're kind of like if you're at the full end of the customized service business and you're kind of a creative consultant, you want to beware of productization. But the reality is that there's just not many firms like that anymore. You look at the most lucrative firms, productized services, or like I like the way Tim framed it, programs, value-based pricing. One of the things you have to watch out for when you start to productize your services, two things. Number one, you quit listening in the sale. You listen only long enough so that you can match whatever the product is on the shelf behind you to the client's situation. And number two, you start to productize your pricing too. So productize the services, value, price, and that seems to be the sweet spot. I'll write on that more in the future.
Awesome. Well, maybe that's a future webinar too, because I know that we've got a lot of interest within the soda community and certainly members that are playing with that and starting to incorporate those practices into the model. So, well, I want to close with that, and just huge thanks to Blair, Tim, and Brent for joining us today. We really appreciate it. For those on the call, we'll have a recording of this, and if you registered for this session, we'll send that out through email so you have access to it. Definitely encourage you to look up Blair at Win Without Pitching, Tim at Ignition Consulting, and also check out Brent and the team at Cantata. Cantata is a great professional services automation platform for those of us thinking about agency operations, but they also do a lot of just thought leadership within the agency and professional services space. So well worth heading over to Cantata and checking out what they have going on with their podcasts and blogs as well. But thanks again, everyone. We really appreciate it, and we'll hope to see you around soon.